Have any of you ever played with slot cars? As a kid, I had this phenomenal slot car track. I think 4 of us could race together. I used to spend hours in the basement refining my skills. But the funny thing about slot cars is that no matter how well you drive them, keeping them on the track is a Herculean effort. Sooner or later, usually sooner, everyone's cars just whiz off the track. Now, slot car sets usually include these little snap-on yellow plastic guardrails that look super cool, but they include barely enough of them just for the corners. So I ended up buying like a lot of extras from the hobby store. I used to move those guardrails around and adjust them every time the car jumped the track, trying to make a circuit that would let me drive as fast as possible, but still keep the cars powered and on the track. Eventually, my track was rimmed in yellow in an attempt to stop the cars from taking flight when I drove too fast, which, was always. And it's kind of funny that I just said that like it was a thing I used to do. Anyway, even with guardrails, the cars would jump out of their slots and sail over the fences until they came crashing down on the cold concrete floor like a scene from Fast and Furious 37. Grandpa steals a Prius. Still, the guardrails prevented most off-track shenanigans, and at least you didn't have to dash across the room to retrieve the cars, and very often put them back together. Without guardrails, racing isn't much fun because everyone ends up running around the room picking up their cars. I suppose that's still racing, but it's also exercise, and who wants that? The point of slot cars is to apply enough electrical current to move them forward as quickly as possible, keeping them in their slots without hurtling them over the edge. The hobby is the definition of staying in your lane. If you don't keep the car in the groove, you're not going anywhere, but push it too much and it hurtles to its doom. Well, my slot car nostalgia has me thinking about how humans, somewhat unfortunately, define and organize civilizations much like slot car racing. We make up generally agreed upon rules of behaviors, guardrails, and then we ask people to follow those rules by staying in their slots. The First Testament, the Hebrew Bible that Jesus knew, is a collection of the evolution of Jewish identity and thought, all written within the guardrails of the Ten Commandments. It's an excellent example of religion and society's intricate, shared journey. Throughout the First Testament, readers discover an evolving society as religion and politics influence and adapt to each other in a never-ending gavotte. Ideas about God are not set in stone, but evolve as the Jewish people and their religion adjust to often harsh new realities, such as exile. Over time, their ideas about God, their relationship with God, and what that relationship demands of their public conduct also transform. The First Testament is the record of an adaptable people with a flexible religion. Adaptability and flexibility are part of the reason Judaism is still around. A lesson many contemporary religions have forgotten is that throughout history, religions adapt or die. For example, there are very few Zoroastrians today, more than you might think, but still very few comparatively. I'd wager that many people have never even heard of Zoroastrianism, even though it counted millions of adherents at one time and was the world's first monotheistic religion, at least in the West. Zoroaster, sometimes called Zarathustra, was a 6th century BCE priest and religious reformer. He was very unhappy with ancient Iranian religious practices, like animal sacrifice, polytheism, and what he considered just a bit too much hallucinogenic assistance. Zoroaster established new regulations and helped create not merely a new religion, but the foundation of every monotheistic movement, including Judaism. Zoroaster even profoundly influenced Greek philosophy. Pythagoras mentions him by name. Zoroaster didn't move the guardrails. He went to the root of the problem and laid down an entirely new track. I think Jesus is trying to do the same thing in Judaism. Actually, Jesus wasn't quite as radical as Zoroaster. Jesus doesn't want to obliterate Judaism and start a new religion. In part, that's a tribute to Zoroaster, though, because the Jewish people were already monotheists. Jesus just wants to fix what he perceives as a new set of problems primarily caused by institutionalized religion. Jesus thought that Judaism was too restrictive. There were too many rules in place, stifling the faith. The elite priestly class, part of the privileged 1% of the ancient era, were fundamentalists whose ancestors created so many rules to keep people compliantly slotted in place that they effectively stifled anybody's ability to covenant directly with God. By Jesus' era, by the way, instead of 10 commandments, there were 613, proving that even thousands of years ago, if you wanted to kill a good idea, all you had to do was send it to the bureaucrats. Reformers like Zoroaster and Jesus recognized that social, political, economic, and religious guardrails must be flexible. Otherwise, the rules, once so necessary to divine and develop a civilization, become restrictive and terrorizing, strangling the social development that they were meant to nurture. Institutions, especially religious ones, become resolute and demand their adherents stay in a slot, even though people hate staying in a slot. It's also more than a bit disingenuous to think it's possible to stay in any one lane for very long. We should never expect to stay in the same lane for a lifetime. What we believe is influenced by our contemporary understanding, or misunderstanding, of the universe. If religions and social structures don't adapt, we create a chaotic, confused, distrustful, and disconnected world where people can't even agree on fundamentals like planets are spheres, not plates. Our knowledge of the universe's most minute workings, notably the discovery of quantum entanglement and parallel realities, has changed how most people perceive God. It's why so many of us define ourselves as spiritual but not religious. We have experienced something powerful in the quantum images we see here, in the Hubble and Webb telescope images, in meditation and yoga. We see God in all aspects of nature and in the most ordinary and extraordinary experiences of our lives. We see God in one another. Billions of us have experienced God, and we've done so for the most part without organized religion, and too often, I have to say, in spite of it. Most faiths still teach and preach ideas developed in the Bronze Age. The old religions keep trying to force us into their slots because they fail to recognize that the entire track changed a long, long time ago. There are no slots. We live in a world of religious diversity where everyone is free to drive wherever they want, to switch cars, switch lanes, make new lanes, and otherwise find their uniquely personal road to God. Mixing it up with others and trading cars with your friends is encouraged. So drive a different religion for a while. Try a new spirituality. Different ideas enhance our faith. Different roads provide new scenery. Imagine how peaceful our world would be today if throughout history, the leaders of all of the different faith movements had said from the beginning, listen folks, this is just one idea about God. Rabbi Shlomo down the street, he thinks differently, and that's okay. Let's not be afraid of each other because we have different ideas about everything. Our faiths should be flexible. They should adapt to changing times. And most of all, faith should always lead us to acts of loving kindness. We don't all need to believe the same thing, but we should begin recognizing that we're better together. It might help if we start taking down the guardrails and driving outside the slots. Amen. Our questions to consider today are, what is your approach to faith? Do you stay in a particular lane or do you drive all over the road and maybe even go off the rails sometime? And what do you think about all of those things? It's all good. So let's take these questions into a small group discussion for a little while. We have a new friend.